It's over 9,000!
Welcome, Super Elite Warriors, to Final Forum, a podcast for the discussion of all things Dragon Ball. I am your host, Jelli, an elite recruiting member of the Frieza Force on a mission to find the best warriors from across the galaxy to join the greatest army of all time. And I am joined, as always, by my new recruit co-host.
Yeah. This is the Bekinney. Boy, this mission didn't last very long,
Whatever
did it?
do you mean, Bekinney?
You can't be serious. After you overloaded the shields and fried the amoeba, we lost all systems except life support. We've been adrift in space for days with no shields, no long-range scouter to even attempt to point ourselves in the right direction, and we've received no incoming communications basically since we started this mission. We could get crushed by an asteroid or punctured by or even a tiny piece of space debris and be sucked out into the vacuum of space. There are clearly enemies who are jamming our signals, so I don't even know why we're pretending we're doing this podcast, and we're probably both going to die this time.
I admit, things have looked better for us.
When?
But we are members of the Frieza Force. We're elite warriors. We're on one of the flagship vessels in Lord Frieza's fleet. I have faith we will find a friendly face sooner than an enemy.
Based on what? Aren't we specifically supposed to be outside the normal jurisdictions where we might find typically friendly faces? Aren't we supposed to be exploring untapped areas for recruits?
Take a breath, recruit.
I can't. We'll run out of life support if I do. The blackness of space will envelop us. We're doomed. I can't. How can you be so calm?
I said take a breath, recruit.
Whew. Okay. Are we just going to sit here and wait for death or what?
If that is our lot, then so be it. We will leave behind a record of our journey and our deaths. If they happen, we'll be avenged. Our names will last forever as the Frieza Force wipes those who would dare harm one of our own from this very plane of existence. As soon as we started this mission, we became immortal in that way. There's nothing we can do to better our current situation. So, just breathe. Whatever will be, will be. Queso syrup.
Queso syrup?
That's another Earth saying, I think.
Ah, yes. Another saying you shouldn't know from a planet you've never been to or seen that you don't remotely understand.
Right you are, recruit. It's one of the great mysteries of the universe. Like how you look revitalized every time you escape certain death.
That wouldn't be a mystery if you'd let me explain
And speaking of leaving a record of our journey, as I alluded to moments ago, I think it's time we delve into this week's topic. And this week we'll be hitting up episodes 15 through 19 of the anime, which is basically the training mini arc.
Yes, the training arc. So essentially this starts off with an episode centered around a new character named Launch, who, as we learn shortly after being introduced to her, switches personalities and hair color every time she sneezes. She goes on a rampage, robs a train, starts getting chased by the... when she's found by Goku and Krillin on their search for a peachy gal. They show up, they beat up the cops, they decide to kidnap and traffic this woman for the men. They bring her back to the island. Master Roshi pretty happy with who they've brought back for him, decide that he's gonna, take him on as pupils. Then he learns that Launch was being followed by the police and decides that they need to amscray before the fuzz get on their tail. They decide to relocate their kidnapped victim to a new location so as she can't be found. Roshi packs up his house into another convenient capsule. They head to another island. This one's a little bit more. It's got a small village on it. Set everything back up, and he goes about starting to train Krillin and Goku by doing some very, very odd things like delivering milk, teaching them not to get stung by bees, having them swim through shark-infested water, and of course doing all of this while wearing a giant turtle shell. Just, standard martial arts stuff. This goes on for about 8 months. All the while, they keep the woman in captivity, having her, cook for them, clean for them, whatnot. Until eventually, they're, enrolled in the Budokai Tenkaichi.
That's a way to explain it for sure.
With their little thing in episode 19, when they go to the tournament, they're gifted suits by, I believe is it Launch that gives it to them?
Yeah, the two suits, yeah.
Yeah. And these suits that they were inspired by the movie Knockabout starring Sammo Hung. They also resemble those worn by Yakuza typically in the 60s. So it's probably just, Toriyama playing with contrasts and opposites again. You can see, two sweet boys dressed as, playing at opposites again. Tournament itself is held on a place called Papaya Island, which is modeled after Bali. It's generally accepted that Toriyama took a trip up there in around 1985 and used his pictures as kind of like a frame of reference for this place. And you can tell because it doesn't look like any other place that they've been in the show at this point.
And we're going to talk more about the tournament itself in our next episode and some of the key pieces of the architecture and stuff that we start to see towards the end of that 19th episode. But, we're going to spin back to the beginning of this in episode 15 and talk a little bit more about Launch because, she's a pretty interesting character. Like we've said, and for anyone who's coming to us for the first time, what our philosophy always is to talk about something that's a little more immediate now while it's in front of us versus a character who will be around a lot. Like we've skipped over Bulma and we're now skipping kind of over Krillin because Launch is here and Krillin is here, much later than Launch is. And
Launch won't be with us much longer.
Yeah. So Launch is modeled after a girl who appears at the beginning of the Jackie Chan movie Wheels on Meals. We'll try to post a pic on our social, but if you just search that phrase, you'll find it pretty easily, and you'll be like, "Oh, there she is." In Japanese, her name is Ranchi or Ranchi, which is the Japanese approximation of the English word lunch, which fits into all the food puns that Toriyama makes. However, Funimation, when they're doing the dub, names her Launch. So why would they do that? Oh, Ranchi is also the English approximate or the Japanese approximation for the English word launch. So Funimation is attempting to keep that A in her name when they're anglicizing it, but then this confuses the fandom as to what her name actually means because she is in fact prone to launch into violence. But
I see what you did there.
Yeah, see? But while her English language dub name and the name that we then are referring to her as is Launch, the intent was definitely lunch. You can see her name printed on a motorcycle on the cover of chapter 26 of the manga, and it says lunch. Although it's partially covered by her legs, it still definitely says lunch. Also in the second Dragon Ball movie, which I know those aren't canon if you get into things like canon, but the second Dragon Ball movie, Sleeping Princess in Devil's Castle, she says at one point that people jokingly call her Itadaki Ranchi, which is a combination of her name, Ranchi, and the Japanese phrase, let's eat. So people call her Let's Eat Lunch. Furthermore, in a guidebook, one of Toriyama's assistants calls her Lunch. So, of course, though, unfortunately, Toriyama himself is very little help in clearing this up, as when he's asked, he says, quote, "I can't remember. It was probably something or other." Thanks a lot, dude.
Always a man that really pays attention to the details.
He's also never clued us in as to whether her good side or her bad side is her normal personality, nor has he commented much on her inspirations. The violent persona, though, is somewhat similar to a Dr. Slump character named Polly Buckets, who always has a gun and is ready to start blasting. And we've seen Toriyama repurpose some characters from Dr. Slump into Dragon Ball, so it's possible he liked that character and he just tweaked her for this by making her more violent, whereas Polly Buckets is a good guy. This kind of also explains why Launch always has a gun handy whenever she transforms into the violent version of herself. Polly Buckets always has a gun. The other thing that I was thinking about too, even though we don't quite see it a lot from Launch, is, are you familiar with the concept of hammer space?
I can honestly say I am not.
Okay, hammer space is it's a fan invented way of explaining whenever a typically animated character pulls something out of a bag that is bigger than the bag space.
Okay, I gotcha.
They could do it either out of a bag or from behind a lamppost or from a panel off screen.
Or like Roger Rabbit when he pulls like a giant mallet out of his pocket.
Right. Or like Bekinney when he says he wants to pull out any amount of cash he needs, no matter the amount.
Callback.
That's hammer space, and the term is originated from the manga or anime Ranma 1/2. It comes from their fanfic community, and it's largely a result of one of the characters, I think Fanon, who just is perceived to always pull a hammer out of nowhere.
Got it.
And then when fans played that up, the anime played the hammer portion of it up even more. And so now, like, hammer space is a widely accepted term in manga, anime, cartoon communities to describe what a character is reaching into whenever they pull something out that they shouldn't have.
Nice. I learned something new today.
So, do we have any thoughts on Launch? Do you like her? Do you dislike her?
I don't know if she's around long enough for me to really form a solid opinion.
Yeah. Now, how do you feel about Toriyama basically just forgetting that she exists? And
it seems pretty on brand for him, honestly.
That
I mean, I do like the character. I like that it's very much like early Dragon Ball, where even like your underused supporting cast have like weird abilities. I could see it maybe being useful in some contexts, but it's mostly just used to like punish Roshi for being a pervert, which I'm also fine with. So
fans come to realize that that Toriyama has possibly forgotten about her when Toriyama introduces Marin, the blonde, not blonde, the blue-haired girl that looks kind of a bit like a even bustier Bulma,
and is the one that dates Krillin for like a week or something like that.
Yeah. Fans are like, why wouldn't you just have him be dating Launch? And Toriyama's like, oh, Launch.
Oh right, that other female character.
Do you remember that? I don't remember this. That apparently Launch has a romantic interconnection with Tien.
It's kind of like hinted at. I don't think it's ever like outright stated, but I think it's at the end of the second tournament, if I'm remembering correctly. Tien's kind of found and made friendly to the group. I think it's implied that she goes off to chase after him when he disappears into the wilderness, I guess, to go training or something.
I guess I don't recall this.
It's like literally like one line another character states, because Launch isn't even there to say it herself.
And then her last appearance in any format really is she makes a very brief appearance in Dragon Ball Z in the Buu arc when Goku is asking everyone for their energy. We see Launch raising her hands up in the air to give him some energy for the Spirit Bomb.
Well, I mean, at least we know that she survived chasing Tien out into the woods.
Yeah, and she has like a
there's
food truck company now.
also, to be fair, that's the anime, so it's very possible that Toriyama had no idea about that.
Oh, 100%. I kind of like the character. I think it's a fun gag, you know, like
It's kind of playing on, I think, this perception of like, and I could be way off on this, but I get the feeling it's kind of like the idea of a woman being perceived a certain way in public. And you'll notice that, like, a lot of times when she goes out in public, she's her blue-haired self, and she's very personable and very nice. But then when she's at home alone with the guys, that switch flips and she becomes a monster.
Now that you mention it, that yeah, she's not super often that we see her blonde.
The only time she's ever the evil launch in public that we see, I think, is when she robs the train.
There's another moment later, during one of the tournaments. It might be the second one. It might be later in this tournament, but I think it's the second one. Because that's where, you know, you're talking about that's the last time we see her. She's in her yellow hair mode, and they are all like, we can't find anywhere to like sit to watch the matches. You know, we're not going to be able to watch.
Oh, that's right. She fires off the gun to clear people out.
And she commits a public shooting, and
probably that one didn't age very well. Let's just put it that way.
No. But yeah, I mean, it's a fun gag. I like it, but yeah, she's just
there's not much else to the character.
I don't know that I ever need to see that character again, you know?
Yeah.
I don't think I need to see her anymore. But
I wonder if it's a commentary on domestication, like calms down wild women or something.
So that's launched. It's just something to talk about. Let's talk about the next piece of the puzzle of this batch of episodes, which is
the training, Shugyo, as it's called. So in these episodes, Goku and Krillin undergo what they call their Shugyo, or their austere training. Before we get the concepts behind Shugyo and the metaphysical aspects of Goku and Krillin's training, we'll just briefly want to talk about how the training itself that they undergo is pretty unorthodox, kind of like how I hinted earlier. For Western viewers, it probably bears familiarity with the Karate Kid, you know, wax on, wax off, paint the fence, sand floor. Training via not being aware of training, but there's really never been any life corollary to this methodology as a primary training method. Certainly many athletes have stated that they practice their skills in like other sports or in other aspects of their life to help them refine their own, but nobody ever gets good at baseball by, for instance, chopping wood all day. Right. So this unorthodox trainings without training, training without training, I guess that's a good way to put it, is due to Toriyama's fascination with movies wherein this type of non-training is more commonplace. Shugyo is inherited from the Chinese concept of Xiulian, I think is how it's pronounced, which means something close to refinement through drilling and fire. So it's basically a concept that by tapping into your internal crucible, you can forge yourself into a refined piece of strong metal through drilling and repetition. The more drilling and repetition, the hotter your crucible, the more perfected and strong you become, essentially firing out the impurities and imperfections of your body and your soul. Shugyo is more of a discipleship than Xiulian, but the general idea of cultivating the mind and body through hardship is pretty much the same between the two of them. This training is more than just drilling. For one thing, Toriyama doesn't so much show us that by undergoing this difficult physical training, they're undergoing psychological, mental, and spiritual changes. That's implied in the name Shugyo itself. As we move forward, we'll probably just lapse into calling it training. Just for those of you out there, it's just easier for us. It's just a word on the top of our head. But for now, we'll keep saying Shugyo to just kind of like help reinforce that. Just to note the more spiritual connection and emphasize that it's not only a physical strength these boys are entering, but also a spiritual as well. In order to move stronger and faster than humanly possible, one has to tap into their ki, or their internal energy, and learn to control and manifest it, and how and when to tap into it. Similar to how a mother can, like, you know, lift a car when her children are in trouble. It's like figuring out how to tap into that at will, essentially. Roshi's training is so do or die that it trains Goku and become masters of themselves through emotional and spiritual means, even as it trains their physical bodies. So that the hardships like being stung by bees, being chased by sharks is supposed to make them tougher emotionally and spiritually as well as physically.
Yeah, it's not enough to just train physically. You have to be pushed to the brink mentally and emotionally as well. That's how these concepts are a little bit different than just martial arts training, drilling, just punch, punch, kick, punch, kick, kick, punch. That's why we're saying Shugyo so much. We like Bekinney said, we'll probably just eventually at some point lapse back into just saying their training, but it's their Shugyo, and this idea is influenced by Buddhist and Taoist ideals and are perceived actually as a path to enlightenment. When we talked about Roshi, we mentioned that a Taoist monk leaves behind all attachments to become one with the Tao, and this concept is central behind Shugyo as well. A master shows you the gate and he shows you the path, and that's the discipleship portion, but it is up to you to walk through and embrace the Tao, embrace the nothingness and the emptiness in order to attain mastery of these things. That's why Goku is such a natural at this, aside from just who and what his character is, as we've witnessed so far, and as we know about him as later on being a Saiyan and those sort of ex post facto explanations. The Go kanji in his name is the same as the Wu in Sun Wukong, and it has this connotation of enlightenment and awareness of the nothingness. So Goku, as we've discussed, is aware of his truth, and his name itself even means aware of the emptiness. He's already passed through the gate of nothingness, emotionally and mentally, but he still needs the Shugyo because while his innate abilities make him predisposed to cultivation, he requires a master to show him the path. Anyone can undergo Shugyo, no matter their level of expertise or predisposition. Contrast that idea of like anyone can do it, anyone can train, with this Western and especially with Christian beliefs. In Shugyo, in Buddhist thought, in Taoist thought, you're cultivating yourself. You're bringing enlightenment under your own control. Christians maintain that salvation is accomplished through Christ. They say through him all things are possible. But there's no path to heaven, no path to salvation that does not pass through Jesus. Taoists believe there are over 3,000 paths to enlightenment, and Buddhists teach there are something like 80,000. There's no one Shugyo, there's no one system, and there's no one way to achieve enlightenment to the higher planes. Martial arts training just happens to be one of them. As a brief aside, we talked about Journey to the West with Sun Wukong cultivating himself. He's doing it through martial arts training and battles. But Xuanzang, the monk, is going down a more traditionally studious and spiritual path, right? He's on a spiritual quest for enlightenment by trying to get texts and scriptures and things and learn more about the faith. They both become Buddhas eventually, but they achieve it through totally different paths. As long as each person takes ownership of their internal cultivation and purification, anyone can achieve enlightenment through any of a wide variety of means. Dragon Ball, just obviously, because of it being a battle manga, focuses on martial arts.
And the working theory, speaking again about Journey to the West, is that martial arts began in India and are initially seen as brutish, anti-Buddhist, but over time they adopt more Buddhist methods towards cultivating their skills, and Taoist students take up martial arts as well, and perception kind of softens somewhat. Eventually they become intertwined with these two religious systems, and the cultures become so intermingled it has kind of like a give and take relationship on all sides. Martial arts become seen as austere, important for those who can calm their minds and control their emotions properly, and Buddhism becomes slightly more martial, kind of like like that give and take, like we were talking about. You can become a Buddha via martial arts cultivation, as Sun Wukong does, and battles you closer to enlightenment. Buddhism may be pacifist by nature, but by defeating demons both internal and external, battle can bring one closer to enlightenment, and to kind of pivot to Taoism a little bit here, make a person one with the Tao. And you can see how this informs so much of who and what Goku is as a person as he goes through these different battles that he faces. always giving his enemies the benefit of the doubt. He doesn't cultivate his martial arts prowess to beat up opponents. It's more to improve himself. He assumes others do as well, or at least should anyway. This is why he doesn't go full out unless he needs to, and why he always wants to fight everyone when they're at their best. He doesn't want to hurt or kill anyone usually. He's not looking to hurt them or just physically dominate them. He's looking to master himself and beat his previous self. It's important to note that it's never solely physical or mental or spiritual. If you want to master yourself via spiritual cultivation, you must have enough physical mastery over yourself to study yourself, calm your body, and have physical control so you can truly hear your internal self. Likewise, if you choose the path of martial arts, you need to cultivate your mental and spiritual faculties as well, tying into the concept ki, as we mentioned briefly earlier. It also goes without saying that the challenges have to become increasingly more difficult. This is key to Dragon Ball's ever-escalating plot. Goku has to face more and more difficult threats in order to improve.
Right, and that's, you mentioned Goku doesn't want to kill anyone. He doesn't looking to beat anyone usually. That's where, when those things happen later on, and we'll see them, that's why they are such big deals. Because it kind of goes contrary to like everything he believes, kind of. So yeah, so the big difference between Shugyo and a vocation, like what we see in Western society, is that Western teaching is linear. You learn a bunch of things about a bunch of things to take you from A to B to C to D, and then you're more or less done, like you graduated. Even if you approach something a little more esoteric like the arts, you're introduced to theory and basics, and it's rare that a person approaches their craft with a singular eye on one specific part of it. You might become a violinist or a composer or a pianist or whatever, but you're likely going to study some musical theory either way, and probably also some technical aspects, and you'll also dabble in composing and playing, etc., etc. Shugyo, on the other hand, is very specific and cyclical. You're not on an arrow path from A to B to C. You can pick up at any level and skip some and train differently. You're on a spiral staircase with each step along the way comprising the ABC of it all, and then the next step is also ABC, and so on. We come to see a lot of this in Dragon Ball Z, and then even beyond in Super, where Goku or Vegeta or Gohan skip certain steps or transformations and are still kind of at the same physical fighting level as, whoever they're either competing with or each other. There's no one right way to wind up becoming Super Saiyan Blue, as we see in Dragon Ball Super. There's an infinite number of paths, or 3,000 if you're a Taoist, right?
Or 80,000.
Yeah.
For you Buddhists out there.
This is the cyclical nature of undergoing Shugyo in order to improve, in order to overcome an obstacle, but with different paths. It's just another piece of how Dragon Ball is always continuing. The story never has to end because there's always a new path to overcome a new obstacle. That's something that I think Super has really played into. This ever-increasing challenge, and the harder the path, the greater the victory, whether or not you win, it's because you've pushed yourself. So you're pushing yourself to never-before-imagined levels to attempt victory. You win whether or not you win. This is one of Roshi's key lessons to the boys. One of the few times he actually re-explains something to Goku, and something that Goku, once he understands it, he very much internalizes it. Roshi tells him in a very simplified way to help this naive boy to understand, cultivate yourself, train for the sake of it. Do this and you will live a good and happy life. Only fight if you must. And Goku's like, oh, I get it. The light bulb goes off for him and he takes it to heart. The idea of battle always excites Goku, but not for the battle itself. It's because he wants to test his training and see how good he's become. This is like how he differs very much from a traditional Western superhero. Like Batman or Superman, they'll emphasize for sure that fighting isn't what makes them great. And, their battles aren't the true path to victory. They'll say things like that, but ultimately they're kind of out looking for it. They're out to find a fight. They're out to at least find a situation that could potentially lead them to fighting. Goku, in his free time, he's not looking for good deeds to perform. He's not looking for anything that'll run him across evildoers. He just wants to train. He wants to cultivate himself and just get better. He learns from Roshi that winning and losing are way less important than making sure you never lose sight of yourself. That's why he's always excited even when he thinks he might lose, or in the case of Cell later on, knows he probably will lose. He wants to see if his cultivation is paying off and if he'll be able to keep sight of himself even as he's being pushed beyond his previous limitations.
And there's a really good example of that in the manga as well. It's like right after the Frieza saga, right before the androids show up, and Trunks is telling everybody, hey, these androids are coming. Bulma says, well, hey, we'll just use the Dragon Balls and keep them from ever showing up. And I think it's Goku, Tien, and I can't remember who the other character was. I'm thinking it was either Piccolo or Vegeta, but I'm not sure. They all like immediately rebuff that with like, well, no, we want these guys to show up because we want to see if we can beat them. Like this guy came back from the future and told us there's fighters coming that we literally can't beat. Of course we're going to test ourselves.
Right. Yeah, and it's because Goku doesn't really ultimately often care if he wins or loses. We're going to get into it, I'm sure, when we come across Vegeta, but that's the big difference between Vegeta and Goku. Is Vegeta's self-worth is tied to his ability to win.
And as kind of like a really good highlight of the difference between the two of them, when you look at specifically early Dragon Ball, whenever Goku loses a fight, he's never even usually upset about it. He just kind of like moves on with his life and continues to work getting stronger. Whereas when Goku finally beats Vegeta, like it eats away at him for a long time.
Yeah, until it reaches a pretty horrific boiling point. Yeah, and I mean, even God, it's hard to even say that Goku defeats Vegeta. And we'll talk about that more when we get there. But yeah, he is battered and beaten, and he knows if he hadn't had some help, he would have lost. That Vegeta was better than him. But what's like the last shot you see of Goku in that arc is he's laying on the ground with his body battered and beaten, and he's smiling.
Yeah, and then he's telling Krillin to spare his life.
Yeah, because he wants to fight Vegeta again someday.
Yeah, because he wants that final answer of would I have won if I fought by myself?
Right, and can I improve myself to the point where I could beat this guy who's that much stronger than me? So, yeah, it's a pretty interesting concept. I like the idea of contrasting it to like even stuff in the arts, right? And how we approach it of like, yeah, you might end up becoming a pianist or a violinist, and you might even start off at being 6 years old and being like, I like that thing there. What is that? And someone's like, that's a guitar. And you're like, oh, I like that thing. But you're gonna, pick it up, play with it a little bit. You're gonna then take lessons. You're gonna learn musical theory. You're gonna probably learn how to play other instruments. Whereas the more Eastern thought of it would be like you being like, I like that thing. And someone being like, all right, here, now play it until you get good at it, like
here, relearn everything we know about musical theory on your own.
And here, strum a single string 10,000 times until you perfect strumming this string. Now then strum the next one, like it's just a very different mindset.
I mean, the thing that springs to my mind when I'm talking about these concepts is the Japanese, I don't know if it's like a philosophy or if it's more like a religion, but Bushido, that devotion to something until you perfect it, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And it can literally be anything. Like if you pick up a broom and you decide this is going to be my thing, I'm going to become the best sweeper in the world. Like that's a totally legitimate application of it. You just devote yourself to becoming the best you can at something. And I think that also ties into, because obviously you need like passion to do something like this. And it's also kind of exemplified in the Shugyo that they go through, where it's incredibly difficult, but then he's also like essentially, giving them cinder blocks to carry around with this, basically what this turtle shell is, to do even the most mundane tasks, to the point where just doing these mundane tasks requires 100% focus and 100% consciousness of what you're doing at all times. There's no free space in their brain for other thoughts. There's no free space in their brain or their body to do anything else other than their training doing it. And I feel like that kind of ties into, have you ever heard of the concept of being in the zone?
Yes.
Particularly in like sports, but I've also heard of like musicians, actors, like a musician that's doing like say improv, and they just are really feeling it and they get into it. They talk about like being in the zone. Actors that are really kind of in the scene and they really understand a character talk about the same thing, kind of just everything else, all the other distractions, everything just kind of fade away, and all of their focus and passion is on this one thing that they're doing at the time.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, if you really think about it, you've probably had moments like that in your life, right? Where all concept of time and outside interference of any kind just like fade completely away. And you become...
I mean, I know I've had that, yeah.
I think most people in our community will probably say, "Oh yeah, I've definitely lost like weeks of my life playing a video game,"
Yeah.
And that's I think something that resonates, when you start to explain it in that way, that needs to be when you're performing Shugyo, when you're really committing to this method of training, that needs to be your thought at all times. You need to at all times be fully committed to and focused on that task.
Yes, I agree 100%.
Yeah. So with that said, if you could perform Shugyo, if you were allowed, if you were, I'm going to say it two different ways, and you can answer both of them. We can maybe take turns, whatever, if you want to, unless you have one answer. I think I just have one answer. But say when you're Goku and Krillin's age, right, around 12 years old, or the age you are now, and I won't embarrass either one of us by saying what that is, and you're doing something, and it's something you enjoy, because that's the Goku and Krillin do both enjoy martial arts before beginning this training. They have an innate ability to it and they enjoy it. So you're doing something that you enjoy and that you have an ability for and an affinity for, and the master of it comes to you. What is that thing when you're 11 or 12 that you would pursue that master if they presented themselves to you the same way that Roshi and Goku kind of happen across each other?
So younger me would probably have gone with either John Romita Jr. or Todd McFarlane, and it would have been art, definitely, 100%. Older me has since spent a lot of years not doing art and doing other things. I think current me would probably pick Matthew Mercer, the DM for Critical Role, and just study under him to become the absolute best Dungeons and Dragons dungeon master I can be.
Yeah, you're a big D&D guy.
I'm a big
We've
nerd,
never
yes.
mentioned that on here. We're both nerds, so
that's a fair point.
Yeah, I'll say mine, I think, is the same for both, honestly, because it is something that I used to enjoy, for sure used to find the challenge part of the fun, and now the more I do it now, the more I wish I had way more time for it, and I would totally follow Stephen King as my master and go with writing and creating fiction. I have so much fun doing it. The more I learn about the craft, the more I really, really like it and really respect it. I wish I had way more time for it. What little I do have, I spend on certainly not planning or writing out any of the things that we say at any point during our bi-weekly episodes. These are just our...
I was going to lob out a rhetorical question and be like, Jelly, have you ever written anything before?
These are just our ordinary conversations that we're having.
Yeah, totally.
But no, so that's I do a little bit of writing. I have actually written a novel once. I've never released it or anything. I need to eventually, I'm sure. But yeah, it is something that, you know, the more I've done it and the more I do it, the more I'm like, man, if I could really make a living off of doing this, I would 100% walk away from everything else.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's, I mean, it's funny because there's definitely people who are like, oh, well, I'm sure everyone would do something fun like that if they could. But like, no, not really. There's some people who are like, yeah, man, if I could do anything in the world at all, I would farm. I would ride horses. I would play football. I would, there's some people who are like, if I could do anything in the world, I would sell stuff to people because I'm good at it and it's fun and I like talking to people and interacting with them. There are people like that.
Sure. Know a few of them myself.
Yeah, I'm not one of them, but I mean, there's
here's a good question. Have you ever found yourself in the zone while writing?
Well, 100%. You know, I mentioned in one of our episodes, and now I can't remember if it got left in or edited out, but I mentioned, you know, Stephen King's book on writing, and he talks about finding the story, you know? And I very, very much remember I was like writing something, and I was off on this. I don't want to say it was a tangent, but I was off on a flashback on one of the characters and just writing something about one of the characters, about their past. And all of a sudden it just hit me where the next piece of like the plot had to go. And I just started writing it. And I mean, I got 15 pages of writing in, and I lost complete track of everything else.
Nice.
And it's, I'll say it too, it has happened in my work life, honestly. And my work life is pretty boring. Charts and sheets and reports to Lord Frieza.
Yeah.
I
was a desk jockey for a while, so yes, I can concur. There are some days where you'll be working away at something, you look up at the clock and you realize, oh wow, it's already done.
Yeah. So how about you?
Oh, I've definitely had a few sessions that I would run for friends and stuff where everyone gets really into their characters, and I'm playing an NPC that I particularly like, and the improv that goes back and forth is sucks you right in, and then the next thing you know, it's already been like 3 hours, and I have to, you know, call a break or end the session for that week just to have more time to create more content for them to play. So yes, it has absolutely happened before.
Yeah, and that's like when whatever you're doing is at its best.
Yeah, I agree.
You know?
Yeah, definitely.
And anything. I mean, even I would say there's very few exceptions. I would say like the exception is like, have you ever gotten into such a groove with like you get a little snacky and all of a sudden you've eaten like 4,000 calories and you don't even remember having eaten it?
Oh yeah, I've done that. A perfect example is like when you were talking about video games earlier. I'd sit down and play a game with friends or something, and you know, we'll sit down, and the next thing you know, like 6 hours has gone by, and half of us are like, "Oh man, I haven't eaten yet today."
And you get like into such a groove of eating that you eat way too much, and you didn't even taste it. It's just sitting in your stomach, and you're like, "Oh yeah."
Yeah,
I feel
I've been
awful.
there too. I didn't even enjoy what I just ate. Dang it.
The other way I experience that a lot in my life right now is I work out a lot these days, And I've definitely gotten into grooves with working out where I've been like, especially I do a day where I literally just do push-ups and pull-ups. And just push, push, pull, pull, push, push, pull, pull. And that's all I'm doing the whole time. And you get into this, I did 50 last time. I just did 51. I just did 52. I just did a 53rd one. And now I'm doing pull-ups and I just did an 18th and I just did a 19th. And you get into this like, it's one of the easiest
almost
workouts I do.
like a high. Like when I used to run all the time, that was a big thing for me. I'd get like the first 10 minutes are like warm up, and then you get into a groove, and then the next thing I know, I'm like miles down the road, and I'm going, oh wait, I should probably turn around and go home.
and it was one of the easiest workouts to do where you could really see your progress.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's a really good kind of segue a little bit back onto Dragon Ball in this is, Roshi dangles that carrot out for them and that's a really funny scene too. When he's like, if you can move this rock, I'll teach you martial arts. And Goku's like, this rock? And he pushes it and he's like, no, not that rock. Anyone could move that rock. I meant this rock.
I didn't mean that one.
But it gives them a goal to strive towards. And that's a great moment. I really like that. There's some really good moments in this batch of 5 episodes or so with that kind of stuff. With there's some great humorous beats, and there's some I really like the moment when they're walking up the mountain and Roshi is smoking his pipe, and Goku's like, this is so hard. This is like the hardest thing I've ever done. And Roshi's like, I remember your grandpa Gohan used to do this all the time. And he just like, my grandpa used to do this, and gives him that
that starry
feeling of being close. Yeah, feeling of being close to his grandfather. That's a really great little moment. And you also see Krillin start to come around towards the end of these episodes. He has that, I forget which episode it's in, but he has that moment of they'll not make fun of me anymore type of thing. And he starts to, because he's introduced as this wily, rascally enabler of Roshi just to get whatever he wants kind of person.
Yeah.
But as he's kind of the character we see the most undergo a emotional and spiritual change from this training. And that's, Goku's the flat character. So someone needs to be there to have an arc. And in this case, it's Krillin.
And at this point in the story, I'd say that's his either third or fourth character that he's done that to.
Right.
Because when you think about his initial contact with Bulma, it's very antagonistic, and he eventually wins her over. You think about his initial contact with Oolong, same thing, very antagonistic, and then realizes he can't beat Goku and decides to just go along with him. Same thing with Yamcha and Puar, and now with Krillin.
Right.
It's already been established as a theme for this character.
Right. So, yeah, this is a cool little mini arc, and this is also really our transitional arc. This is where Toriyama is slowly transitioning us from being purely gag based and gag driven to being battle. And we see the characters in more actiony situations striving towards a goal, and this is the moment where Dragon Ball kind of pivots. Well, would you look at that? You and I just talked for a while without you once throwing a fit and collapsing upon yourself.
So this whole episode was just a way for you to get my mind off of things?
Not just that. Mine too. I need to be occupied as well. We all do better with a task to perform. How do you feel?
Angry. Angry at you. Angry at you for tricking me. Angry at me for being tricked. Angry at me for thinking you would do something normal. Angry at you for not being...
But no longer full of dread and terror?
Son of a bitch.
Look!
What's that?
Listeners, a shadow has just fallen over us. It has eclipsed our ship and cast us into darkness. It appears to be vaguely in the shape of a ship itself, although we cannot tell if they are in docking position or attack position.
It's got to be attack position. They'll blast us from the sky, and that'll be it.
Nah.
That's all you got? Nah?
4 things. 1, I wouldn't kill us so soon after crippling our ship. In fact, I'd probably just wait us out and then commandeer the ship and steal our tech and whatever useful body parts we leave behind.
You're sick.
2, if I was going to just blast us out of existence, I wouldn't announce our presence first. I'd never even let us know we were coming. And 3, it looks like their cargo bay doors are opening. They're probably sending someone out to see if we're alive or if this is just scrap that they can salvage.
Scrappers? You think these guys are scrappers?
A minute ago you thought we were dead, and now you're going to be picky about how we're saved?
But scrappers? Gross. You know they all smell like cabbage, right?
I don't know what cabbage is.
It's a leafy vegetable that smells really unpleasant.
Well, be that as it may, we'll take our leave of you here, listeners. Will I ever learn what cabbage is?
It is. And hey, what was reason number 4?
What?
You said you had 4 reasons for thinking we weren't under attack. What was number 4?
Will I ever pay attention to Bekinney? Will this turn out to be a mercenary team that comes aboard merely to slice our throats, harvest our organs, send a message of pain and blood and declaration of war against the Frieza Force?
What?
Will I tell Bekinney what reason number 4 was? Find out next time and help us achieve our final forum.
Final Form is written and produced by Tom Gwelly. It is performed by Dan Kinney and Tom Gwelly. Our webmaster is Dan Kinney. Our theme music is provided by YouTube content creator GVG Kid. Want to learn more about the Dragon Ball universe, including concept art, behind-the-scenes interviews, and recommendations from Jelli and Bekinney? Connect with us on social media. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Final Forum Pod. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you receive your podcasts. And of course, make sure to share with your friends and family and help us spread the word of the glory of Lord Frieza. The Frieza Force thanks you for your listenership.